Welcome to Tales from SYL Ranch Live, where everyone is entitled to my opinion, and I'm Bill Stone. Tonight on Tales from SYL Ranch, we may or may not get to any phone calls. I got a fair amount of content tonight, so I'm not entirely sure. We will, of course, talk about the weekly Lancaster County, Nebraska virus statistics. We will talk some about the Million MAGA March. We will talk about a review of Star Trek Discovery Season 3, Episode 13, Thank God This Season's Over. That Hope Is You, Part 2. We will talk about the Trump-Georgia phone call, and finally have a review of Doctor Who's 2021 New Year's Day special. This is, of course, a live stream, so even if I don't get to any callers, I am happy to talk to you in chat. You can bring up anything that you want. You can talk to me about things that are political, social, the virus whose name I cannot mention without my channel and my videos being ranked even lower than they already have, or even things relating to science fiction, fantasy, superheroes, and other related genres. I am happy to answer each and every question in as much detail as I possibly can and as truthfully as I can. There are some subjects that I won't discuss because they're personal, but pretty much anything else is fair game. I'll get to as many of my viewers as I can with the understanding that I don't want my show to go much longer than about 3 hours because I am an old man and I have lower back arthritis. And, well, the pillow I'm sitting on that makes me look fat does help quite a lot. It doesn't help completely, so 3 hours is about all I can do in a chair at a given time. I'm not really going to give out my call-in instructions. They scroll past on my lower third. I'm certainly happy to have you call me. At least, show that you're interested in calling me. But I got a lot tonight, and I'm not entirely certain that I will be able to get to any calls. Hey, Blazer 101. I see Biden, Harris, and Pelosi are writing in the new COVID-19 laws, and it breaks a lot of your constitutional rights. Well, of course it does. We've got a Democrat-controlled everything. We're going to experience all kinds of horrible socialism. And the COVID-19 laws, the virus, unnamed virus of unspecified origin, the laws for that, of course, are going to be highly socialist and will curtail our constitutional rights. That was a foregone conclusion. That was just a foregone conclusion when those people were elected. We're screwed in the near term and long term, and it's going to be their fault. Unfortunately, there's no way to stop that. In order to stop that, you would have to stop 2 entire generations from voting, and that's not going to happen. What we're going to get is socialism. We're going to get hardship, misery, and death, no matter how it goes down, and there's nothing we can do about that. The best we can hope for is that the survivors of such a thing will have learned their lesson about socialism. Don't hold out any great hope that they will, but it's certainly a possibility. So while we wait for a few more people to come in, I guess I'm going to answer the question that nobody asked. What are the current Lancaster County, Nebraska virus statistics where I live? As always, this is sourced. You can find the exact same information. It's always sourced in my description box. Only suggestion is that if you're new and you go there, change the default view from last 14 deaths to total deaths, because that'll give you a much better understanding of the current situation. Otherwise, you're dealing with statistics that fluctuate, from day to day. So we've got, 128 deaths I think we're up to? 128. So if you add one, well, it's a significant percentage, but it doesn't tell you the whole tale. So, as always, the current total Lancaster County population is 323,826, with the number of tests now standing at 137,295. That is up 3,350 from last week. This is not representative of a percentage of our population. This is a representative of the number of tests. Because if you have a positive test, they'll probably send you for another one to make sure it gets counted as another test. Or if it's indeterminate, which can happen, they'll send you for another test. So it's not really individuals who've been tested, it's just the number of tests. Out of that, the total number of positive tests is 23,439, which is up about 1,427. Sorry, my poor man's teleprompter means I occasionally have to look around my camera. This represents a slight uptick in the ongoing decrease that we've been seeing, and it probably corresponds to the additional testing and the weather that we've been having that's keeping everybody home even more than everything else did prior to this, which frankly wasn't a whole hell of a lot of difference. But hey, Marshall, glad to see you. And okay, SpaceX launch. Yes, SpaceX launches are always worth catching. Always a bummer when I overlap something like that, or I usually overlap Jesse Milestone's stream. But hey, Thursday night is Thursday night. We are up to a total of 128 deaths. That's up 5 from last week, probably is corresponding to the increased number of positive tests. However, 5 increase in 1 week is still a significant dip in terms of the rate of increase of deaths. So we're seeing fewer new cases. Deaths as a percentage of total tests is 0.93%, up 0.2% from last week. Again, corresponds to additional testing and positive tests. Deaths as the percentage of positive tests is 0.547%, which is down 0.019% from last week. It is statistically identical to last week. It does represent a slight continuing downtrend from last week. But still, the whole thing is slightly greater than 0.5%. I'm living for the day when it gets back down to about 0.3%, which is where it had been for most of the summer. Marshall says, good stage 1 landing, though, and tomorrow, SN9, yay. Blazer 101 says, Biden did say once he's in office, he will lock down the country. Oh, yeah, I know he has. Won't that skyrocket unemployment and food stamps? Well, absolutely, but that's what the left wants. They want complete control over your money. Best way to do that is to get you 100% dependent on them. That's what they want. That's what they've always wanted. They have wanted a significant economic downturn since Trump was elected. That's what they want. USA is still functioning. Yes, it is still functioning today. I will talk about that some later. Anyway, this deaths as a percentage of the total population of the Lancaster County is 0.095%, which is up 0.0015% from last week, making it statistically insignificant. It is still true that more people die in this county due to misadventure, driving drunk, doing something stupid, stuff like that, than we have deaths since this began. Okay, so I got to talk about the Million MAGA March yesterday and President Trump's role in it. I've had some time to think about this and to talk about this with a person whose opinion I very much trust, my pseudo-producer, J. Marshall Presnell. Okay, here's what I think honestly happened. Trump does not understand the power of his office. He just doesn't understand it. Other presidents have understood that when they go shooting their mouth off, if you say the wrong thing, you can cause stock markets to go down or even crash. You say the wrong thing, and whole nations can be brought down just by saying the wrong thing. But he's a narcissist, no question, an incredible narcissist. When I say that politicians are power-mad, sociopathic narcissists, well, by God, he sits on that, right up there on that narcissistic side. He is a showman. He has used it to great advantage when doing things like his political rallies and stuff like that. And I don't think he understood that he is not a private citizen. He is the President of the United States. Now, unfortunately, not understanding that means that what effectively happened yesterday, as if you watched my stream, you saw, what effectively happened yesterday was the culmination of 2 solid months in which he said that, everything was terrible, and people would say, oh, the Kraken is about to be unleashed, and people would believe that. Trump would usually say, no, there isn't, but he would believe that, he would also say things like, any second now, something's coming that's going to change this all around. And he did that for 2 solid months. And then he said to people for a month or so, show up in Washington the day that they're going to be certifying these electoral votes. And then he went out in front of those people and reiterated everything that he'd said about how he thought the vote had been stolen from him. And make no mistake, I think, in fact, this vote was stolen from him. I can't prove it. I'm morally certain of it. When I hear people talk about all of the ways that this could have gone south, the various attack vectors that we see for this, it becomes statistically unlikely in my mind that at least some of those things weren't used, right? So he went out yesterday and it was the culmination of having kind of whipped people into a frenzy and pointed them directly at the Capitol, at which point something happened that has never in American history happened. They talk about it happening during the War of 1812. Well, yeah, that's not correct. It's different than that. This time around, it was American citizens who essentially rushed the Capitol, broke the Capitol doors, got into the House of Representatives, and that has never happened. It caused a joint session of Congress to very hastily, I watched it happen, bang the gavel, we're in recess, and they fled for their lives. A joint session of Congress was forced to flee for their lives because of American citizens. And those American citizens, unfortunately, believed that they had the go-ahead from the president to do it. They had been whipped into a frenzy over a long period of time. Blazer 101, Democrats doing that all the time doesn't matter. Two wrongs do not make a right. The right was wrong to essentially storm the Capitol and force a joint session of Congress to flee for their lives, because that's what happened. I mean, if you've got 400,000 people coming, you're going to have security. God, I would be. Security would be in there talking to the speaker saying, Jesus Christ, we are not going to be able to protect you. If something goes wrong, please, for the Christ's sake, get out of here. And that's what happened. They didn't know what was going to happen, and they told them to flee. And that was the right thing to do. It was absolutely the right thing to do. In terms of the amount of blame that you can put on Trump. Okay, the fact is, for the last 4 years, the media propaganda complex and the big tech propaganda complexes have been, sorry, my thing is going to hell. Let me find another card. Why, oh why, are you being goofy on me? You piece of crap, right in the middle of talking something, it decides to go to hell. Okay, it looks like that's fixed it. Anyway, the deal was for the last 4 years. For the last 4 years, the left has been completely out of contact with reality. Completely out of contact with reality. I mean, the number of places where you can point them to, totally out of contact with reality. And the media and big tech propaganda complexes are actively working against Trump. Okay. There's no question that has been happening. And because of that, and the fact that Trump makes a deal out of it, see, prior presidents, understanding the power of their office, don't make any kind of statement about that stuff. They never pushed back. And this is partly why. Because pushing back is saying to people who agree with you, the president agrees with me. I am free to go and do the things that he's talking about, to talk about the things he's talking about. Prior presidents didn't do that. If the press said something negative about it, they just ignored it. And that's the right thing to do, because to push back on it, while it might feel really good to support people who support the person, to push back on it helped create this atmosphere. There is no question in my mind, because I have certainly felt very frustrated. I'm not on the right, and as yesterday's thing kind of proved, I'm not on the right. I'm a libertarian. I like to think I have my head more grounded in reality, frankly, because I don't care about either of these idiots. But I think the right, and certainly myself to some extent, have been very frustrated by the way that we've been treated by the media propaganda and big tech propaganda complexes. I get that they were on edge. I certainly have been watching complete idiots in my social media, whom I have engaged with from time to time, who are saying we need a civil war. Idiots who have A, no conception of what real war looks like, and B, have no conception about what the impact of that would be globally and at home, and how it would cause nothing but massive famine, death, and pestilence throughout the United States, and kill about 15% of the world population in the process. Idiots. Anybody who wants a civil war is an idiot. We might get one, but if you want it, you're a fracking moron. So that bothers me quite a lot. You guys who want civil war, you're just so damned bloodthirsty. I mean, you want to see blood and gore and guts and veins in your teeth and eating dead, burnt bodies. You sit there going, kill, kill, kill! And you want it. You really want it. And that's disgusting. You have clearly never experienced a real war. You clearly do not understand the effect that a civil war would have on this country. Now, it very well may be, that we are past the point of no return. But what Trump did yesterday, and given what he said afterwards, I think that he probably had no fracking clue what would happen. Now, me, I totally understood what would happen. I was monitoring that thing well before I started to stream on it, because I'm going, oh, God, oh, God, oh, God, this is going to go down badly. Oh, my God. And sure enough, it did. It didn't go down as badly as it could have. That mob of 400,000 people could have completely overrun the Capitol, found where these poor people were hiding and cowering in fear of their lives, and murdered them. Along with, by the way, a bunch of people would have been shot in the front. You know, if you'd actually been able to get in very far, you would have been killed. The people in the front would have died. But I think that would have just inflamed the crowd even more. You can't kill 400,000 people. There aren't enough bullets. You know, maybe if you brought in a couple of tanks and just ran through the crowd, that might cause them to shut up and go away. But otherwise, no. What happened was a foregone conclusion. And unfortunately, the President of the United States, probably unknowingly, I'm going to give him this, probably not understanding that the presidency is a pulpit from which people will take their cues. When he comes out and he says to a crowd of 400,000, we lost the vote this way, we lost the vote that way, we lost the vote that way, we lost the vote that way, it was all cheating and everything. It may be that he's right, but standing in front of all those people means that you have just rubber stamped whatever it is that they want to do. Any action they take from that point out, they believe that you have just rubber stamped it. So going and storming the Capitol building, that sounded like something that was being rubber stamped. Now, after the fact, I think we could say Trump didn't get it. He's a narcissist who did not understand the power of his office. I think now, judging by what he said, he probably does get it. But at the time, he didn't get it. He did not get it. What he was doing was, in fact, inciting insurrection. Whether he understood that or not, that's what he was doing. That what happened yesterday probably wouldn't have happened the way that it did had Trump not been agitating for a month for people to show up down there, and at the same time went out in front of them all and essentially, from their perspective, just said, you have my stamp of approval. Well, he didn't understand that that's what the presidency is. He didn't understand a word from the president can crash stock markets, cause entire countries to fail. He didn't get it. Now, do I believe that the right has every reason in the universe to be pissed off? Absolutely. You guys have been enduring lie after lie after lie after lie for 4 years. It is absolutely infuriating, but that does not give you any kind of excuse to do something that has never occurred in all of American history, which is Americans storming the Capitol, causing a joint session of Congress to hastily recess and flee for their lives. That was wrong, and I don't care if you say, oh, the other side does it. 2 wrongs don't make a right. It pushed this country closer to civil war, which is damned close right now. Let's see. Let's back up here some of my stuff. Schumer security shot and killed that Trump supporter. I don't care. when you are storming the Capitol building and trying to breach the doors of the chamber of the House of Representatives, sorry, I'm going to kill you. If I'm one of those people whose job it is to guard that, you're a dead one. You're just dead. I'm going to shoot you in the head. I'm going to put 2 in the chest and 1 in the head just to make sure. It's just that wrong. Antifa is responsible for breaking into Congress. Let me get into that momentarily here. Let me put a pin on that because I have something about that. Dalton Brazier says, we do have to remember that these people have caused genocides in 2 separate countries and have caused the deaths of 2 million innocent people in the Middle East. I'm not sure which they you're talking about. For my entire adult life, basically my entire life, the United States has been interfering in all kinds of different countries. We have caused countries to topple intentionally, and is kind of my deal. You wind up too. Yes, I kind of do. BLM can burn and loot and murder, and that's okay. No, it's not okay. It's okay with the press, but it is not morally okay. I have said over and over and over, I speak out about those guys. It's okay with the press because they're propagandists. It's not morally okay. Yes, yesterday was in fact worse than most of what the Antifa does. They have not caused a joint session of Congress to recess and then flee for their lives. That has never occurred in any of American history, ever. It has never happened. Missing some of the chat messages. Yes, I am. I know I am. I'm having to go off. Pelosi and Maxine Waters killed over 200 million babies. It's justice served. 2 wrongs don't make a right. Marshall says no drop. His on-screen chat is not reflecting what we see on ours, or at least mine. Well, it's behind by 5 seconds. I know that for sure. You have to tell me. It looks like I'm seeing chat. It's just that I was ignoring it while I spouted. Notice Drop 2 says some of the responses get edited from Bill's chat. I didn't know anything I'm doing. Marshall, this has been happening for about 2 months. Intermittent. Because that's weird. I don't have anything where it's slow chatted, and I don't have anything where I wouldn't put anything past YouTube at this point. I wouldn't put anything. If I start talking about that unspecified virus of unknown origin by name, I've had them pause one of my streams prior to me finishing it, and then unpause it the moment I stop talking about it by name. It would not shock me at all if they're screwing around with chat. I know that I'm trying my best not to. I know there's a 5-second delay between when you type something in and when it shows up on the screen, and I deal with it sooner than that, but there's still about a 5-second delay. Drop 2 says, I thought Bill had someone retracting some chat responses. No, I've never touched it. I've never touched it. I see a couple of them here where it says message retracted. I have nothing to do with it. I have nothing to do with that. I try very hard, very, very hard. So about that deal, it being, let me read exactly what it was. Antifa being responsible for breaking into Congress. It's an eye for an eye. Eye for an eye means everyone goes blind. An eye for an eye is not appropriate. You must always try to be peaceful. When you start wanting civil war, then you're wanting to go out. Really, are you willing to go out there? I tell you what, you want to try and see what civil war is like, go and sit in one. Take a trip to some country that's having a civil war, because there's always some country having a civil war, and you take a look at that. You take a look at the bodies. You take a look at the shattered brains that are all over the place. You take a look at the dead children. You take a look at all the destroyed infrastructure, the destroyed everything. You go take a look at that, and you come back and you tell me if that's what you want to see in America's streets. Hey, Star Cheese player, and you wind with the toothless, blind civilization. Yes. Delenn had it right. He'd have to give me the exact quote on that. I'm not sure. But it is not, I get I totally get that the right has felt pressured and pressured and pressured and pressured for 4 years. And seeing what looks like a president who got the election, their president who got an election stolen from them, is over the top for them. I get it, but you still don't have the right to go and hurt people. You don't have the right. Eye for an eye doesn't work. Just because you're pissed off doesn't mean that you have the right to go and do things to other people. Let's see here. Want to see a civilization looks like after a civil war? Go to the Appalachians. Yeah, I haven't seen. Yeah, and the smell of a battlefield is one you never want to experience even once. Yeah, you're talking about horror of a kind that, unless you served in the military, you probably have never seen. I look at, when I was teaching for 2 years as a technical college at the place that shall not be named, I had lots and lots of veteran students. And they were people who'd just come back from Iraq, people who'd just come back from Afghanistan. Some of them had served multiple tours. The best students I ever had, hands down, best ones I ever had, with one very memorable exception, but I understand he'd been dishonorably discharged. But every one of them was really good students. And some of them came back with significant and permanent psychological as well as physical problems. These were guys who had seen horror, who really knew what horror looked like. Well, unfortunately, that is now about a generation ago. Those guys have had children, and those children are starting to reach adulthood. And those children have never, ever seen the horrors that their parents have. Never seen it. Do not understand what real horror, real death is like. Again, if you're in favor of any kind of civil war in the U.S., for God's sake, get on a damn plane and go to any war-torn country in the world. And you sit out there in the thick of it and you tell me that that's what you want to have happen in the United States. It's stupid. Sarsi's player said, Delenn said the toothless blind quote in response to Garibaldi. Yes, talking an eye for an eye. Absolutely. Burning flesh is horrible. Yes, Blazer 101, only BLM can loot and murder. Trump supporters get the cuffs. This is not about BLM and Antifa. They are an irrelevancy. They don't matter. See, as a libertarian, I don't care about either side at all. I look at the Antifa and BLM. You know what? They say that it's the right's fault. Sitting where I am, I have lots of people on the left and the right because a libertarian, we're so incredibly small in terms of a group. We can't afford to build bubbles, intellectual bubbles around ourselves, right? The right generally builds an intellectual bubble filled with only people who agree with them. The left fills themselves with an intellectual bubble that only agrees with them. But the problem is, as a libertarian, our bubble is about this big. If we want to have friends, we can't afford to not, engage with people who don't agree with us. Well, I don't care about either of them, ultimately. I do not care. If they do something bad, that's bad, and I will call it bad. And I have 1,000,000 times on this show. But I don't care about them when I'm talking about this side. When this side does something bad, I'm going to say it because this side doesn't matter. They're separate entities. Just because these guys do something bad doesn't mean these guys get to do something bad too. And I have not been particularly critical of the right for 4 fracking years. Partly because the left has reached a point in which they are an enemy of civilization itself. But at this point, I can't not be critical. They did something that never in American history has ever happened. They caused a joint session of Congress to hastily adjourn and flee for their lives. That has never happened in American history. Not ever. Have we seen riots in the past? Oh, God, yes. Look around the time that the Teamsters were getting started. Riots, you want to see that? Hell, Chicago has an entire police frequency that is called the riot frequency. Those guys had riots for so long that were so common that they have an entire police frequency devoted to it. Just what they do in Chicago, If there's a riot after, because it happens when the Cubs won the World Series a couple of years ago, when I guess in 2015, did they have a riot? Yes, they did. I listened to it. They had a riot. Does that mean that it's then okay to riot if the Bears win? It's just two different things. Just because the Cubs fans rioted doesn't mean, okay, well, it's good for the other guys. The Bears fans can riot too. It's wrong no matter what you do it. And I don't care which side you're on. Marshall says, mix in a bit of napalm and the horrific smell of burned blood, and that's what a wonderful smell you've discovered. Not. Drop It 2 says, let's make a bet. How long will Biden remain president? I say he'll be gone by Independence Day 2021. I have no conception of where he's going to go and how long it'll take. Having a close family member who is, and this is one of those things, by the way, that I don't wish on anyone, certainly not, President-elect Biden, because that's what he is. I don't wish it on him because it doesn't really get better. It's a horrible thing to have to watch happening. So I don't wish it on him, but clearly he's suffering from some level of dementia. Exactly what level is impossible for me to say, looking from the outside in. I know it doesn't get better. I wouldn't be surprised at some point during his term he didn't have to resign. I wouldn't be surprised about that. Sarchi's Player says, seriously, I was really hoping you would talk about this. I've been disturbed since I heard about the riot at the Capitol. Yeah. Well, I did do 3 hours on it while it was happening yesterday. But ultimately what we have is a president who did not understand the power of his office. And frankly, in my mind, because of what's happened, he has proven himself unfit for office. I totally understand the calls for his impeachment. Intended to or not, he did essentially take a crowd of people that he whipped into a frenzy and point them straight at the Capitol doors. He said he was going to walk them out there. Now, his statements afterward make me think that probably he just didn't know. He's such a giant narcissist who believes that, in fact, the election was stolen from him, that he doesn't understand that the president's words have an enormous impact anywhere in the world. You can actually crash stock markets with it. Obama used to do that all the time. He would say negative things that would cause the stock market to dip. He did that all the freaking time. You can cause governments to topple. The President of the United States, what they say and what they do is incredibly influential. So when he spends a month whipping people into a frenzy to come to this rally, and then spends half hour, 40 minutes whipping them more into a frenzy, then what happened, and then says, now let's go to the Capitol, where we have a joint session of Congress going on, where they are certifying the electoral votes that were stolen from me. That is a rubber stamp to that damned crowd, and whether he understood it or not. Probably he didn't, but from my perspective, not understanding that means that he is no longer fit for office. Yes, and as Marshall says, an impeachment at this time would and virtually ensure a civil war. Of course, they're proposing it, yes. Drop 2 says, William Henry Harrison, the 9th president, served the shortest time in presidential history in only 31 days. Can Biden beat that? I expect he will. And I agree, Marshall, that impeachment at this time isn't appropriate precisely because it would throw gas on top of a flame. It would be horrible. It probably would cause civil war. I'm not clear that we can avoid civil war, but that would certainly be a trigger. Having, again, been whipped into a frenzy over the course of the last several years, as the right has been, either as a backlash against the media propaganda complex and the big tech propaganda complex, or because Trump is constantly tweeting crap out that he really shouldn't tweet. It would just, if you impeached him, it would just be frightening. The best thing we can do right now is just wait for his term to run out and be done with it. That's the best we can do. Tell which to Obama that his words caused problems. There's no point in telling him anymore. He's gone. He's been gone for a long time. Drop Shoe says the evil fraudsters have stolen the U.S. presidency. Now the USA has to live with it. Well, the President is, as always, and this includes Trump, a power-mad sociopathic narcissist. It's why I'm a libertarian, because these people, okay, we vote out one power-mad sociopathic narcissist, we just get another. It doesn't matter which side they're on. It doesn't matter if they're a Democrat or a Republican. They are all, without any exceptions, power-mad sociopathic narcissists. And the world we live in is exactly what happens when power-mad sociopathic narcissists rule the world. So I do want to talk about this notion I've heard about it not being Trump supporters who breached the Capitol building doors and then the House of Representatives. I am seeing pictures floating around of some guy and his cohorts who's wearing some giant frickin' Viking helmet and just looking like a complete dork. Here's the deal. To begin with, that picture is totally unvettable. I've looked at it. It's unvettable. You cannot tell where it comes from. You cannot tell who it was that posted it. You don't know what might have been photoshopped about it. All it is pictures making the rounds saying something. Earlier this week, there was a picture making the rounds of Obama, Fauci, and Melinda Gates with an Asian woman in some kind of a medical lab that was being touted as, look, this is all of them in a Wuhan virus facility. This is all getting ready for what we have now. And actually, if you did the slightest bit of research, took me about 3.5 minutes, you discover that, in fact, it was a picture taken at a visit to the National Institute of Health Services, NIH, at their Bethesda, Maryland offices in 2014, in which they were looking at research into Ebola. That's the sort of crap that keeps getting floated around. Just crap. Okay, I'm sorry. You have a crowd of 400,000 people, and you're telling me that right at the front of them were a bunch of them who, one of whom supposedly was wearing a Viking mask, but when I watched it yesterday live while I was doing this, the rotunda clearly had more than just those people in it. The rotunda, I didn't count. I wish I could go back and find it so that I could count. But I would have to say that there were at least 50 people in that rotunda. And you're telling me that all of those 50 people and the ones that there are pictures of walking into the House of Representatives who were not wearing stupid Viking helmets on your head, you're telling me that out of a crowd of 400,000, the Antifa snuck in right at the front of that to cause problems. I can't buy that. Because on the left, right, because I have people on the left who are friends of mine, they say the exact same things about Antifa attacks. They say to me, oh, it was secret right-wingers who got into our crowd to cause all the problems. No, they didn't. Antifa caused the problems. Similarly here, no, it wasn't Antifa. It was people on the right. It was part of this giant crowd that had been whipped into a frenzy who believed that the best thing to do now was go down. And what the hell did they think they were going to do? I can only assume that if the joint session of Congress hadn't recessed and fled for their lives, they'd have been killed, strung up and hung. And where do you think that would give us in terms of any kind of civil war? That would be horrifying. Not only that, but it would have been an event totally without precedent in the United States, because why else would you breach those doors? Obviously they weren't paying attention like I was and didn't know that about the time Trump was finishing up with his speech, they banged the gavel and said, "We're in recess. Run for your lives." Because they understood what was about to happen, and security was not going to be able to help them. A mob of 400,000 people against security. Again, the best thing, if they were going to do it, the only way that you could do it, bring out a tank and just run it through the crowd willy-nilly until they got the message and fled. But regular security was not capable of handling an assault on the Capitol like that. The joint session of Congress recessing and going into meeting hiding made perfect sense. It certainly would have been what I would have done. Oh, the crowd estimates are down to 100,000? Either way, beyond a certain point, it doesn't matter. Marshall says, if you ran for president, would you be a power-mad, sociopathic narcissist? Not at first, but you would become one. I noticed back, and nobody remembers it, the contract with America. The freshman congressman in there, it took him about 6 months to succumb. You know, any of them that are from that era, they're still around. They're power-mad, sociopathic narcissists. It's a function of the amount of power that you're given. And in point of fact, you wouldn't be a power-mad, sociopathic narcissist because you wouldn't run. You know, if you look at them, power-mad, sociopathic narcissists are the only ones who ever run. You know, most people aren't so driven that they want to control the lives and fortunes of 320 million people. But the people in politics do. Every single one of them wants to be king. And that's just why they run. I mean, you wouldn't run, but even if you did, if I ran, I'm a good guy. I like to think anyway, I'm a good guy. But if you put me up there and started throwing everything at me, from money to women to cars to everything that I could have, I would probably become corrupt, just like those freshman congressmen who did in the era of the contract with America. Didn't take them long, because power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. It's just that simple. In terms of objective and subjectivity, it's probably not going to happen today. I don't think. I've got too much other stuff. But something, yes. Purely objective, no. Fact and logic based, yes. With a lot of practice and a wide base of knowledge. That's what would, yeah. There is obviously subjectivity involved here. But see, this is why you should be watching me. I am not on the left. I am not on the right. Sometimes my interests intersect both. More frequently, the right now, because the left has become, in fact, the enemies of civilization themselves. But, by the same token, I am not emotionally invested in any Republican candidate. I am not emotionally invested in Donald Trump. He is, from my perspective, the 10th president of my lifetime. And the difference between him and the other 9 is that he's the 10th. I have no giant love of the man. I have been in a position of having to basically kind of support him, but only because I have seen so much lying going on in our various propaganda complexes. I see these, and that pisses me off probably more than anything else, is the constant, incessant lying. So I have been in a position of having to support him because of that. But I started out, I'll never forget, his term when the left had completely exited reality, and they were coming up with things that just weren't true, using snippets of sound bites to make him look bad, when in fact if you use the whole thing, you would see he didn't look bad. And so I was put in the unenviable position of having to say, hey, wait, would you stop making me, I said it on many occasions, would you stop making me support Trump, because I really don't want to, but I'm in a position of having to because you guys are lying all the time, constantly lying. And again, I understand that's part of what fuels, your average person on the right. They see that they're being lied about. They're being called all kinds of horrible names constantly. If you're on the right, you're a racist, sexist, homophobic monster. You're Hitler, you're a Nazi, you're a white supremacist. All of that is complete nonsense. And I get that if you've been called that for 4 years, you're probably really pissed off. I would be. I haven't been called that because I'm a libertarian. I occasionally. But here's the thing, right? My experience is a little bit different than most people. I started dealing with online forums in the late 1980s or early 1990s. And the thing about it is, in both the political and science fiction world, you have people who tend to be kind of assholes to each other. And it happens a lot. It's basically nonstop in both of those things. And I have my feet in both of those. So very, very, very early on, I learned to have a very thick skin. You can call me a Nazi, and I just go, well, I know it's not true. I don't get emotionally invested in any kind of conversation where somebody's calling me that. If they do, I'll say, where's your proof of that, please? But that, I don't care. I just don't care. I long ago ascribed to the adage that sticks and stones will break my bones, but words will never hurt me. I don't get upset by what people say about me. In point of fact, if you want to say evil, nasty things about me on social media, as long as you're sharing my videos, I'm happy with it. I really am. I had somebody go off on a multi-tweet rant one time about how I'm a fascist because I like Star Trek, the original series. They literally, some woke idiot went off and, just ran it. And I'm like, well, they shared my video that triggered them. That means their followers are going to go watch that video to be triggered themselves. People love to be angry. So, hey, I didn't respond to him. What's the point? He called me bad stuff, but he still shared my video. I don't care what these people say about me at all. I have a very thick skin. Sticks and stones will break my bones, but words will never hurt me. Let's see. If you ran, we already know about you. Marshall says, well, I believe that there is no human being on earth that can resist the temptation of power. Power tends to corrupt, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. I think that's true of everyone, no matter how well-intentioned. Once you get there and you realize that you as a president, you are the most powerful man on earth. You can screw any woman that you want. Marilyn Monroe, I'm looking at you. You can have any woman that you want. You can have all the money that you want. You can, I assume, I don't have any proof that this has happened, but I assume that if a president says, I want that person dead, they're going to wind up dead. That kind of power will corrupt everyone. I don't think there's anyone who's immune. I can't think. The person who came closest to being immune anywhere near my lifetime was Eisenhower. I have a lot of respect for him because he was given an amount of power. One of my favorite docudramas is Ike Countdown to D-Day. And in that, it is made quite clear, and it wasn't something I'd thought about before, the amount of power that Eisenhower had as Supreme Commander, Allied Forces, European Theater, was more power than had Caesar, Napoleon, Alexander, anyone in history. If he had wanted to, he could have set himself up as king of Europe. He could have done that, but he didn't. And then he was elected president, and his presidency was spent generally trying to make some level of peace with the Soviets, which wasn't ever possible. But he was not being tempted so much by that, probably because he was walking away from a job where he had an extraordinary amount of authority. Somebody like that, I would love to see as president again. He came as close and anywhere close to it's outside of my lifetime, but close enough that I can look at it historically and go, wow, there's a guy who was offered an enormous amount of power that he could have misused, and he didn't. Drop Truth says, being objective, if he were ambivalent about that, would that be human, though? Well, I'm not totally ambivalent about everything. What I am totally ambivalent about is the right and the left. They're not my group, right? My group is so screwed up. The problem with libertarians is that we each think that we know exactly how to solve the problem, every problem. We each know how to solve the problem. But it's not the same way as the person next to us. Getting libertarians to agree on anything is kind of like trying to herd the cats. I gave up on any kind of libertarian politics a long time ago. And I honestly believe that even if you took a libertarian and put them in office, it wouldn't be long before that power corrupted them. It is inherently corrupts person. But what I don't care about, I am not emotionally invested in anyone on the left or the right. I was never emotionally invested with Obama. I am not emotionally, and I don't think of these people ever. The people on the right are really bad about this. They talk about how he's not how somebody's not their president. Well, nobody's my president. President's some guy that we hired to do a job. And that's all. And if you start thinking of as a president, and by the way, just as a a little piece of this. You start thinking of him as your president. You start thinking of these as some kind of elected king. And by the way, it's a minor detail that I didn't mention in my review for Wonder Woman 1984. But there's a point at which Max Lord asks for an audience with the president. An audience is something you get from royalty. What he got was a meeting with the president. That is the difference between our president and kings. You don't seek an audience with them. You get a meeting with them. They are not your king. They're some guy. And so I have never, ever, ever been invested in any president throughout my entire lifetime. Not a single one of them do I actually get emotionally invested in. Now, people on the right, you're obviously, and particularly the Trump side of the right, you're emotionally invested in this man. Prior to that, people were emotionally invested in Donald Trump on the other side. The reason that the election of 2016 was so bad was because so many people were emotionally invested in both Trump and the other side were emotionally invested in Hillary Clinton. So I don't care about these people. I just don't care about them. I care about what they do, but I don't care about them personally. I couldn't give a rat's ass. Trump is the 10th president of my lifetime. If it had gone down differently, Hillary would have been the 10th president of my lifetime, and I would have cared about her the same as much as I cared about Trump, which is this is a person that was hired to do a job. Now, they're going to frack up the job. They always do on both sides. The fact that I have been forced by circumstance to defend President Trump has meant that I haven't done as much criticism with him as I usually would have. And he's done some things that I think are good that would have been better than any other president. But I don't care about him. I could care less. He's just some guy behind a big desk in a room that's shaped like an oval. I don't care at all about him personally. Yep, Star Seas Player, just a guy hired to run the executive branch. Yes. Basement 2 doors down, Marshall says, being a systems architect, I wouldn't trust computer programs. Yeah, my cabinet would consist of everyone disagreeing with each other. When they agree, I'd know what not to do. Let's see. Steal from the best. Yes, absolutely. Everyone go hit the like button. Absolutely. Hit the like button, sub. Tell all of your friends, family, neighbors, and pets and livestock about my videos. Absolutely. Drop of Truth says, Wonder Woman 84, how does an 80s jet fly from... Oh, yeah, I talked about that during the review. That movie is so stupid in so many ways. It's all over the place. See you later, Starshies Player. And Marshall's had one redacted for no reason that I can see, and now my thing is going nuts. Let me see if I can get to another card where it's not going to be crazy. Oh, Beavis, would you please stop that? That's me doing it. I may have to try... Okay. I think it's okay now. So anyway, those, in terms of the left having caused this whole problem, it strains the imagination. I hear the same thing from the left, that the right is causing all the problems when they get together. Now the right tells me, no, it's all the left. And I saw with my own eyes how many people were actually in that rotunda. I saw some of the people who breached and got into the House of Representatives, and they were not wearing stupid Viking helmets. They were wearing MAGA hats, and taking pictures. And you're telling me that out of a crowd of 100,000, just those ones in the front, they somehow snuck around to the front. They were just waiting to get in, to screw everything up. And yet the other 100,000 people did absolutely nothing to stop them. Sorry, I'm going to have to say that, no, it was the right that did that. Yes, Marshall says Wonder Woman 84, where the average IQ dropped 10 points in the last 2 weeks. Yes. Am I going to review STD Season 3, Episode 13? Yes, I am. That's probably about next on my list of things to do once I'm finished ranting about what happened yesterday, which is close. I'm very close to finishing ranting about it. I've now spent almost an hour on it. Takeaway from this is... if you're on the right, calm down. The left exited reality 4 years ago. You're exiting reality now. And this is because you have a serious emotional investment in President Trump. Stop. Stop having an emotional investment in any president ever. Just look at what they've done and criticize them or praise them on that basis. I sometimes have started to wonder, please talk about Pence. There's not much to talk about. He's the vice president. He's about to be out of office. I'm not sure what you want to hear me. Good work, call. Okay, well, hopefully see you again shortly, Marshall. Marshall's in IT, as I was. And in IT, you are on call 24/7, 365, every single freaking year. There's no getting out of it. I did phone support once from downtown Disney while I was on vacation. So anyway, I'm not sure what to say about Pence. You mean in terms of yesterday? Well, he did the only thing that he could when the joint session certified those ballots. He said, okay, the ballots are certified. There's nothing else that he could do. He couldn't just say, no, I'm going to reject them against the will of a joint session of Congress. They couldn't do that. And he said so. I'm sure he's probably in trouble with Trump as a result of that, but there was nothing else to do. There's a process here. It was followed. The votes were tabulated. The rejections were made. They spent a good chunk into the night arguing about it in both the House and the Senate, and then they got back together and they found enough votes for Biden to become president. Once that's happened, what does the vice president do? Say, well, guess he won. It's the only thing you can do. There's nothing else to do. I would certainly suggest that anyone who is currently contemplating civil war, which we probably are, it's probably unavoidable because we've become, I hate using the term so divided. What has happened is our press and our media propaganda complex and our big tech propaganda complex have been extremely successful. What bothers me is they've won, and they've probably won permanently now. One of the things about a Trump presidency was they were getting looked at. They will never be looked at under a Biden administration, particularly not with the Democrats basically holding all three branches of government. Well, the House, the Senate, and the presidency. What we're going to see is not going to be pretty. It's terrible. We're going to see socialism. We are going to get it. We are going to get all kinds of horror because of it. We're probably going to get the Green New Deal, which is going to starve about 15% of the population. It's not going to be pretty. The best thing I can say is that perhaps the survivors will have learned an important lesson about the dangers of socialism. Drop of truth, that Steve guy, he is a liar. He is a complete liar. Nothing that he's predicted has ever come to pass. There is no reason to believe that anything that he says is accurate. James O'Keefe is an entirely different matter. James O'Keefe's videos, he's got people on there saying things and saying that they're doing bad things. And he's got a whole slew of things that are the morning meetings for CNN. When you have the goods and you put them up, there you go. You can't argue, you can't assail that. But Steve, good God, what a freaking idiot. You should never pay any attention to him whatsoever. Social credit scoring, as per China. Maybe. I don't know what they're going to do. It isn't going to be fun. It may trigger a civil war because of it. But I don't want civil war. I don't want civil war. It's horrible. It's horrible. I can only imagine how horrible it is. Go out and watch the movie Glory sometime and watch the battlefield scenes. And you get some conception about how horrible it would be. Today, it would be even worse with today's weaponry. Ask any drill instructor. If you've never served, ask a drill instructor. What does war look like, and why do you train these guys as hard as you do? Well, it's to save the damned lives, because war is awful, and you will see and hear things that will scar you for life. I know, because I taught guys who had seen and heard things that scarred them for life. Serious psychological disorders as a result of having fought in a war. And any war is hell. And it sounds so trite to say it, but the only way I can really sort of try to hammer it home, suppose that your best friend and your father and your grandfather and your brother and your son are all shot in the head in front of you, and their brains are splattered all over the wall, and you. And then they bring out your mother, and they gang rape her, and then they kill her in front of you. And then they bring out your sister, and they gang rape her in front of you. And there's nothing you can do. You're tied up. You can only watch. And then they kill her. They bring in your mother. They bring in your daughter. All of them. They gang rape them in front of you, and there's nothing you can do. They may leave you with your mouth, ungagged so you can scream at them to stop, but that's what you're going to see if you're lucky. That's what war really looks like. Hopefully when they let you go, they probably won't let you go. After you've seen all that, maybe they'll cut your balls off, and let you watch it all. Then maybe they'll kill you. Maybe they'll do it slowly. Oh, there are so many agonizing ways to die. They can make it go very, very slowly. That's what war is. It is horrible. Horrible. We do not want to see it. We are so pampered because here in the United States, we have never seen a civil war in my lifetime, in anybody's lifetime that's alive now. The closest a war has come to us has been overseas. For people who don't go there and do it, it becomes, oh, okay, it's a war. I've seen those on TV and in movies. That's not so bad. No, you've been watching planned, rehearsed spontaneity in movies and TVs, and they're not real. Real war is the most horrific thing that any human being can engage in and should be avoided if at all humanly possible. The way things are going, it probably isn't avoidable. What happened yesterday only exacerbated the situation. Drop said, when are the vaccinations being presented where I live? We already have some. My GP has already been vaccinated. I know because when I went last week for my 3-month checkup for my diabetes, she and I got into a conversation about it, and I said, well, I'm not going to take that initially because it has not gone through the rigorous double-blind studies and clinical trials that everything else that's any kind of medication on the market goes through. And so we don't know its actual efficacy. We don't know how effective it really is. And we don't know its side effects, which for me is a big deal. I am now on like 8 medications. I do not want a medication that has an adverse interaction with one I'm already on. They have to be careful about what they put me on precisely because they want to make sure that there's no adverse interactions between the medications. So I ain't taking that one. I'm not taking it. I told her I'm going to let about 20 million people do it first so that I know, okay, we can say with some reliability, this is what the actual efficacy is and this is what the side effects are, and we know it isn't going to affect me, right? Then I'll think about it. But not until about 20 million people have taken it. But yes, healthcare workers here are getting it. Death give 1,000 cuts, both physically and psychologically. If you're talking about war, yes, absolutely. And it sometimes isn't the death of 1,000 cuts. Hell, maybe you get to be the one with your brains blown out all over your friends. Maybe you, because you're seriously pissed off. Maybe you're the one that gets to gang rape the daughter. If you're really pissed off, and you think the other side's done worse, why not? Why not gang rape some innocent girl? That's what war is. That's what war drives people to do, and it's horrible. It's just plain horrible. And we don't want it if it all can be avoided. The best thing that could happen right now is what's going to happen, which is Trump eventually leaves office and Biden's sworn in on the 20th, and then we deal with whatever the hell the fallout is for that. And we deal with the horror that's going to be as a result of that. But not planning an insurrection or anything stupid. That just brings more war. There's one other thing I was going to talk about with that, but I don't have it in my notes because it just occurred to me out the top of my head. I guess that's pretty much my take on what happened yesterday. The president, knowingly or unknowingly, did in fact incite insurrection. I don't think that he should be prosecuted for it. I mean, hell, we only have, what's the date today anyway? We've got about 2 weeks of his presidency left. Just let it go. There's part of me, honestly, that would like to say let's impeach him because I think it would be a good warning for somebody who might do the same thing in the future. But by the same token, I know that that would be throwing gasoline on a fire. So let it run out. Let the clock run out. You guys on the right, just let the clock run out and start dealing with the reality of what's going to happen after he's gone. Because there's nothing whatsoever that is going to stop him from leaving. He was always going to be leaving on the 20th. This is one of those things that as somebody who does not care about the left or the right, no particular emotional attachment one way or the other, I just looked at it and said, oh, he's done. It's the same thing with the Georgia election. I saw that, and now people are going, the night of the election, they were going, that runoff election, people are going, oh, they stole the election again. I'm like, you have no proof of that whatsoever. That's coming solely from your belief system. The night of the election, you're saying that there was fraud and shenanigans. The night of? What evidence could there possibly be under those circumstances? Science matters. Evidence matters. Drop of the Two says, declassify everything. There are no doubt some things going on. I have a close relative who does very sensitive, top secret Department of Defense work. He's a contractor, but and I don't talk to him about it. If you're watching, guys, and I know sometimes you do, because of the nature of this relative's relations to me. I know you're watching a lot of stuff. They watch him closely, but I have never spoken to him about it. Never talked about his work. I'm not dumb enough to even ask because the work I've done, I've been in lots of non-disclosure agreements. I know that he can't talk about this stuff, so I never do. But suffice to say, he works inside of Cheyenne Mountain. I suspect there are some things that you don't want to declassify for, actual, honest-to-God national security reasons. And I suspect that if he was able to talk about it, he'd be able to tell me them. Some of the things that he knows about that you shouldn't let go. Again, guys, never talk to him about it. Wouldn't even think of asking him. I tell you, the only time that we have ever talked about his work at all was when we got into the subject of change control in terms of IT and the process that's used. And I said something like, well, I'm sure you have something of the similar. And he said, oh, it's actually worse than the private sector. And I went, doesn't surprise me. But declassifying everything is a bad idea. There are certainly lots of things I'd love to see declassified. But there's certainly no doubt there are some things that you shouldn't declassify, because to do so would be to put the country in jeopardy from some external enemy. I guess the last thing that did occur to me to say about this, looking back on the last 4 years, and God, I didn't like Hillary Clinton. She was one of the only people that I was ever emotionally invested in, because for the entirety of my adult life up until that point, the Clintons had dominated politics with their endless scandals. So when she lost, I was not like, okay, yay, Trump won, because I didn't care that much. I was like, the woman's finally gone. The Clintons, after decades, are finally out of my life. Looking back, I'm not sure it wouldn't have been better if she'd been elected. The left would not have exited reality 4 years ago if she'd been elected. The right would not have had a combative president, unlike any we'd had before, constantly egging them on. I don't think that she is nearly as leftist as somebody like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who's about to get more power as a result of what's occurred now in government. I don't think she's nearly that leftist. I think she would be probably against what Ocasio-Cortez, Red Cortez, is doing and saying. Would she have necessarily turned the country around the way that it was? Probably economically, probably not. Would she have continued all kinds of foreign wars? Yes. Could she have conceivably started a war with Russia? I don't know, because I think part of that was her way of saying it's Trump's in bed with Russia, Trump's in bed with Russia. And when it comes out of the election, she'd probably just forgotten about it. Would the country be facing civil war if Hillary Clinton had been elected? And I have to say that it's very possible that we would not be at this point, because we wouldn't have had 4 years of the media propaganda and big tech propaganda complexes lying constantly, pissing off Trump supporters. We wouldn't have had 4 years of calling Trump supporters very bad names. All of this stuff would not have happened under a Clinton administration. As bad as it might have been otherwise politically, all of what we've seen here is a result of the left exiting reality and the right being very pissed off, not surprisingly, at the way they were treated. And now it's come to a head where we're headed to civil war. And that won't help anybody. I have to ask myself from time to time, maybe it would have been better if Hillary Clinton had, in fact, dominated politics for another freaking 4 to 8 years of my life. Maybe it would have been better. Maybe we wouldn't be here right now. I don't know. But I do know we're here. Please do not go out and champion civil war. Only a fool champions wars. Nobody should want a war. You should be prepared to fight one if necessary, but you should never want to have one. And the bloodthirstiness that I'm seeing on the right now clearly tells me that they have no idea what they're getting into. Yeah, declassified the pedophilia info like the Hunter Biden laptop. I don't think there's that much pedophilia that goes on. I'm sure there's some, but I think most of the pedophilia you can find is in Hollywood, frankly. You've known people who worked at GCHQ in Cheltenham, England. They keep quiet mostly, yes. Why don't I think Hillary would have started World War III? No indication that she would have. I mean, everybody always says, when there's an election going on, no matter who it is, they all say that person's going to cause a war. I mean, all the leftists were saying that, Trump was going to cause a war, when in fact he reduced the amount of wars and got us into less. But a World War III, no. I don't think anybody's going to start World War III. And Hillary Clinton, above all else, was somebody who loved power. Causing a war does not automatically get you more power. She went on about Russia and how she'd deal with them militarily. But people say stuff during their campaigns that they have no intention whatsoever of actually following through on. But it may be that in terms of inching ever closer, as we did yesterday, to civil war, it may have been better if she was president, because we wouldn't have had the left completely exiting reality. We wouldn't have the right now completely exiting reality. We would have had the usual crap. So I don't know. It doesn't matter, because that's not where we are, as I said yesterday. Great quote from Charlton Heston: "You are here, and it is now. You either grab onto that and hold on to it, or you might as well be dead. You are here, and it is now. And where we are now is inches from outright shooting civil war, if it didn't actually start in earnest yesterday. It's been building for at least 225 days as of today. That's how long the Antifa and BLM have been going out and rioting, looting, committing arson, robbery, armed robbery, assault with a deadly weapon, and the murder of innocents. That's how long they've been doing it as of today. And so they're a huge part of the problem. But now I cannot get over the fact I never, ever imagined that I would live to see a joint session of Congress hastily put into a recess and then flee for their lives because of people on the right. These are people who lionize these institutions as a part of their belief system, And yet they caused a joint session of Congress to hastily, very hastily, I might add. It was very interesting to watch because they had one of the senators who was going on about how they're going to object to the certification of these votes, and their time ended, and Speaker Coase, we're now in recess, bang, bang, poof. It was very fast. But the right did that. It wasn't the left. The right did that. The right did something totally unprecedented in all of American history. It has never occurred, and the right did it. I would have thought the left would have done it. But no, it was the right, the people who supposedly love these institutions. They did it. Well, yeah, Hillary is quoted as saying she would respond to the computer hacking with a nuclear option. I know she was quoted as that. But people say stuff when they're running that they have no intention of ever doing. See, the deal was that was when the narrative of Trump was being Putin's ally was going forward, right? So if the other side starts saying, well, if I saw anything like that, I would just nuke them. That's just bombastic nonsense that's designed to feed into what the media and big tech propaganda complexes are feeding. It's just designed to feed into that. Whether or not that ever would have actually happened, I don't know. I took it seriously at the time, but I make no secret of it. I voted for Trump. I voted for him both times because, the first time I didn't want to see Hillary in office. She leaves an extraordinarily bad taste in my mouth because I remember all the crap. Most people only have a political memory of about 2 months. 6 months from now, hopefully, if we don't get civil war, hopefully this will have passed into the background. People really only have 2 months that they remember about anything politically. I remember everything. I remember, the vast right-wing conspiracy that Hillary used to talk about. I remember about all the women that Bill had been banging, and it wasn't just Monica Lewinsky. I remember how Bill Clinton used the power of his office to destroy Monica Lewinsky's life and reputation, which was the worst thing that he did from my perspective. I just watched it all and over and over and over. I watched Benghazi and all of that, and I remembered all the crap that she'd done for 20 or 25 years, and that she or her husband had done. And they're two sides of the same coin, really. When she talks about, every time she says, well, that was my husband, not me, I'm like, come on. I know what happened. He came in and said, Hillary, I got that thing going where I'm banging that new intern. And she said, okay, Bill, fine. Just don't get stupid about it. Okay, I'll make sure that we do it on the down low. That's how that conversation went. She knew everything that was going on with that guy, and it was stupid if you thought she was otherwise. And she more or less, at least tacitly approved. So, just looking at it, I just don't know if it would have been better if she was president. I don't know. We probably wouldn't be in this situation. We probably wouldn't. Because the press wouldn't have been propagandizing against Trump for 4 years. The left would not have completely exited reality, partly because of the press and the big tech. The right would now be not exiting reality and saying that, well, if the left does it, then we can do it. They wouldn't be doing that. We wouldn't have certainly wouldn't have had the right storming the Capitol building. That wouldn't have happened. So I'm not sure what Trump's legacy is ultimately going to be. We will never know. You never know what somebody's legacy actually is until about 100 years after they're gone. And that's necessary because the people in power that could do you harm if you're going to tell the truth about some historical event are dead. They can no longer hurt you. The principals involved who might have negative things to say about those things, they're all dead. So you can go ahead and tell just the truth. I see this, by the way, constantly in Star Trek. Gene Roddenberry, the creator of Star Trek, was a very flawed individual on a number of levels, and I'm not going to talk about him particularly. But he was a very flawed individual on a number of levels. And basically until Majel Barrett, his wife, died, you couldn't tell the truth about it. You couldn't tell the depth of what exactly he'd been doing because there were people alive who you would hurt, now that he's gone, all kinds of details about the man's life have come out. So we won't know what Trump's actual legacy is for about 100 years. And I certainly won't live to see it. I doubt anybody watching me will live to see it. If you do, you're going to be pretty damned old. But the actual facts about what went on behind the scenes and all of that will not come out until everybody concerned with it is dead. And that's why it usually takes about 100 years. So that is pretty much what I have to say about that particular thing. Probably unknowingly, Trump essentially gave a rubber stamp for a crowd of people of 100,000 now to go out and do what they did. And it was not Antifa that did it any more than its secret Trump supporters who caused problems with Antifa riots. It was the right. And if you try to push it off to something else, you're going into an area that is so statistically unlikely. And when you see those pictures of the doofus in the helmet, no, there's Tim Pool himself posted a picture of two guys in MAGA hats that were taking pictures inside of the House of Representatives. This was not people who were on the left. This was the right that did it. You guys need to stand down. For God's sake, stand down. Anyway, that being said, as always, I try to break up some of the more serious stuff, and I have a couple of serious things, with a little bit of science fiction. And tonight we're going to have another review of Star Trek Discovery Season 3, Episode 13, That Hope Is You. This show continues to be crap. Complete crap. Last week, I'll have to remember and put a link to it in my description box. Last week, not long after that stupid episode that I said in my review felt like it was like a 90s action movie with no real consequences to it. Somebody, I've forgotten, Major Grin, I think is the name of the YouTuber. He does brief videos, typically showing something about Discovery where it's stolen from somewhere else. He did an edit of Star Trek Discovery, the last episode, season 3, episode 12. He did an edit with that he married it with Die Hard. I did not have any clue because I didn't remember Die Hard that well, just how much that episode steals from Die Hard. It's like beat per beat, character per character in some cases, just totally ripped it off. He's got a great video out there about it. Look for Major Grin, and I think it's his most recent video. He doesn't make them very frequently, like every week or so with Star Trek going on. It's a great video. Last week's video really was Michael Burnham dies hard. But this one, oh man, this is supposedly a part 2 of the first episode of the season. I don't see how exactly. Maybe they're trying to make this into some kind of arc. I don't know. I don't see any reason to call it that. But they did. They said it's The Hope Is You Part 2, which is Part 1 was the first episode. This thing was just all over the place, and not much of it made sense. Just it was everywhere. It's like Wonder Woman 1984. Where do you start? I mean, there's so much that's all over the place that you're like, wait, why is this happening? Why is this happening to this person? What's going on over here? You had that deal with the child who had a temper tantrum and caused the burn 100 years ago, and they finally got him off of that planet, which everybody expected. But they kept having little MacGuffin things pop up because when they originally started with this particular story, they only had a few hours. Well, last episode, the few hours came and gone like a million times over. So they got them additional medication that would keep them going until Discovery was going to show up, which of course it always was going to show up. That's one of the things about being a secret master of fandom, is that nothing is new, nothing is original. You've watched, read, and listened to over 100 years worth of science fiction. Generally speaking, you figure it out half an hour early, if not earlier. In this case, I figured it out within the first 10 minutes of the last episode. Oh, okay, we found the burnt. It's a kid who gets into a temper tantrum, and then the ship has to leave, so they're going to have to do some wacky stuff and eventually come back, pull him off of there, and then everything will be hunky-dory, which is exactly what happened. That's the thing in a nutshell. The good guys won in a totally predictable way. The plot itself tended to be all over the place. I would have a hard time, honestly, recounting the plot to you anymore the simplistic fashion that I just did. The episode played out exactly as I expected. Even the ending. They made Burnham captain of the Discovery. They did at least finally get these guys in the right uniforms. They've been running around for a year with uniforms 830 years out of date. So they finally gave them the current Starfleet uniforms, and they made Burnham captain of the ship. And that just makes no sense. It doesn't make the slightest bit of sense. This is a woman who, since the moment we saw her 3 fracking years ago, has been consistently insubordinate, mutinous, not following orders, not telling people where she's going, and doing stuff on her own. Oh, it's just awful. She's an awful person, and she does not deserve to be captain of anything. She has, from the first season's 2nd episode, deserved to be in a brig. They should never have let her out. And then they quoted Gene Roddenberry at the very end. I'm sorry. These dimwits have never watched what I have on YouTube. It's also in every single one of my description box. Gene Roddenberry talking about the Star Trek philosophy. I think this sort of crap that we're seeing here is what you get when the producers finally figure out that Star Trek is supposed to be an optimistic show. But the problem is, those producers are nihilists. So they can't really write good optimism. It feels forced when it's in there. And in any case, the whole thing generally tends to be, it happened again, more hugging, more crying. It happened again several times when I was watching. I was like, oh God, will you just stop and act like professionals? Like every other Starfleet person we've ever seen in any incarnation of this prior to Kurtzman showing up and turning it into soap opera whining. The episode was crap. It was one of the crappiest, if not, for a variety of reasons, the crappiest episode that they've done so far. As they did last season, they annoyed people like me, fans of the original series, when they used the Star Trek The Original Series end title theme song. This thing is Star Trek in name only. It really bears no resemblance philosophically or tonally to Star Trek as Gene Roddenberry intended. It is nihilistic, even when it's trying to be optimistic, because the writers, the showrunners, etc., they are all nihilists, and so they can't write anything that is actually genuinely optimistic. They just can't. I mean, if all you ever see in the world is horror, that's all you're ever going to be able to create. So when somebody says to you, well, we need to make something that's not horrible, I'm like, how does that work exactly? Well, I guess that means we force our characters to be sort of goody two-shoes, maybe? Is that what that means? Because, I mean, optimism is stupid. Why do we even have to do that? You just don't know. But this plot, man, just everywhere. It was just everywhere. Ultimately, what the plot resolved to was very simple. Burnham stops being an action hero. By the way, last episode she got a knife stuck in her leg, and for reasons I don't understand, because anybody who knows something about a little bit about first aid knows that if you got a stab wound like that, you don't just pull it out, because the fact that it's in there may be causing things to not bleed, that if you pull out will, because it's awfully close to her femoral artery. So she had this bad wound, goes into the Jeffries tube, looks a lot like John McClane doing things, and then decides, okay, I'm going to cauterize the wound with my phaser, does so, and then starts limping. Well, this episode, the limp was gone. It's only been, this episode occurs right after the other one. There's no reason why she should have, shouldn't have a problem with her leg, but she doesn't the whole rest of the episode. It was just crap. There's a great meme going around that I've stolen from one of my marketing memes that says, it's quoting, I guess, last episode when they were talking about what they do in order to get food. Anytime you're in a closed environment like that, in a starship or anything else, you're in an enclosed environment, and so you have to recycle everything. That means recycling your own excrement, right? And in the future, what they do is they take that, break it down into component atoms, and make food out of it. Okay, that's been established for a long time. The stupid press that doesn't know anything about Star Trek has been going around with big headlines. Star Trek Discovery finally answers an ancient question about Star Trek that's never been answered. And I'm like, no, that was rather explicitly answered in Star Trek Enterprise 20 years ago. So they think it's all new. But there's a scene in there where the Admiral's talking to Green Orion lady, who I don't care what her name is because the show is stupid. And he's saying he's never had an apple, really, doesn't know what one tastes like for sure. Hands her something, and he says, and I quote, it's pretty good for shit. And that's my attitude towards this show. I have a new marketing meme that says, Star Trek Discovery, that scene where he's doing that, holding out some fruit to her, and I say, it's pretty good for shit. That's where we're at here. I wouldn't even necessarily say it's pretty good, but it's certainly shit. It's awful. You should not be paying for it. I certainly don't. Because 40 years in IT is a pathway to abilities that some might consider unnatural. I have friends that let me watch. So I wouldn't pay for it. It was crap. But you have to ask yourself, other thing that really annoyed me about it, lots of great visuals, as always. They have more money than God, so, your CGI and some of your visuals are going to look great. But the directing, holy crap. They did that thing again this director likes, where they spin the camera 360 degrees repeatedly. It kind of works when you're on the exterior of the ship and you want to give the viewer some idea, wait, I'm not sure where I am. And then you're rotating the camera and the ship's going by, and then you rotate to a position where the viewer can go, oh, okay, I got where we are. But you do it inside the ship constantly, and it just is annoying, and it's stupid. We had a lot of that. There's a lot of spinning stuff. Oh, man, and I shouldn't ever forget the fact. Okay, in starships as we've known them before, right? There's not a lot of internal space to spare. There is some like Jeffries tubes that lead to, various parts of the ship's components and stuff like that. But there really isn't that much interior space to spare. We've now been seeing in Discovery, and this episode was really bad about it, that there's an enormous amount of interior space that is, superstructure and God knows what else, turbolift shafts and all of that. It's so large, in fact, that you can have a turbolift shaft going, zipping full speed, apparently from one end of the ship to the other, but so fast that it should have gotten to the end really quickly, and have fights in them and chuck people out to their doom, 30 stories below. And just stupid. It's like the interior of the Discovery is the TARDIS. It's bigger on the inside. It's just dumb. That was so dumb. And the whole fight scenes depended on this gigantic infrastructure on the inside of the ship that you never see and makes no sense for a starship. It looks like the infrastructure in there is bigger than the ship itself. It's just that gigantic, multi-stories down, and I don't think there's any place in that ship that would be more than about 5 decks. But, just stories and stories. Kick somebody out the door and, whoa, I'm going to die now. It's just, it's ridiculous. So that was going on. It was just stupid from the get-go. So we have to ask ourselves, is it any good? Well, it was again, for Discovery, I have very low expectations. My I figure that 1 is existentially threateningly bad. You will die if you watch it. 5 is passable, and this didn't reach the level of passable, that's for sure. I would give it about a 1.01. It was insulting to my intelligence, and while I didn't die from it, a brain aneurysm was certainly a possibility. If you're going to watch this, be aware that it can give you a brain aneurysm. So other thing to talk about tonight, and this is at least something that the people on the right aren't going to be objecting to, right? President Trump had a phone call on, I believe it was the 2nd of this month, with the Georgia Secretary of State and some other people. And the phone call got leaked. And what was happening then was the press was doing their usual thing, where they take stuff out of context to produce a snippet that makes it look really, really bad. Well, of course, I don't listen to the snippets. That would be stupid. So instead, I listen to the entire recording. It's available on the Washington Post website. I ordinarily would say don't darken their doorstep. Anybody that puts democracy dies in darkness inside of a big black box the moment that President Trump is elected clearly is nothing more than a propaganda sheet. But if you go there, you will be able to hear the entire recording. Don't pay attention to the article that surrounds it. It's all nonsense. Just pay attention to the recording, because just like James O'Keefe, when you have the goods, when you have the recording, you should pay attention to that. Don't pay attention to anything else. Don't pay attention to the snippets. Just watch it and listen to the whole thing. When you listen to the whole thing, it's nowhere near as damning as they want to make it out to be. They take the stuff out of context where Trump is saying, well, I need this many votes, I need that many votes. That's not really what happened. Trump called, and he did say it's not inaccurate to say that he said he needed X number of votes, but you have to take it in context. He was talking about the voter fraud that he believed existed. It's all context that matters. It was not nearly as incriminating as you might think. It was just them having a conversation. What struck me about it, however, and I said so at the time, whenever I listen to or get involved in something where there's audio involved or video particularly or pictures or things like that, I try to put myself in what we call fair witness mode. And people who watch the show will know that because I've talked about it a lot, but it always bears repeating because I never know for sure who might come to the channel that hasn't seen me before. A fair witness is a fictional profession that was created by author Robert A. Heinlein for his novel A Stranger in a Strange Land. A fair witness was a trained observer, someone who could look at something and see details and remember it, such that if you called them before, something, a trial, they were considered an expert witness on anything that they'd seen. They could report exactly what they'd seen, but they did not make any assumptions about anything. So if you ask one, what color is the house across the street, they'd say it's white on this side. And if you walked them around and if you showed them that all sides were white, they would not assume that any given side didn't change to green the moment that they stopped looking at it, right? They can tell you about what they saw at any given second in time. So whenever I'm listening to this, whenever I'm looking at pictures, whenever I'm looking at video, particularly of news items, I try to pull back and say, okay, what do I see? What do I hear? What's going on in the context? What can I actually deal with? What can I actually see, hear, touch, etc.? Not what somebody's saying about it, not what some talking head is telling me about it, not what some article tells me about it, but what do I hear unemotionally, without any, again, with no emotional attachment to Trump? What do I hear on this thing? Well, what I heard was something that people on the right might object to, which was Trump made a lot of accusations. He did not, however, in that phone call, provide any sources. He made a lot of claims. He made a lot of stuff. He said this was bad, this was bad, this was bad. We've got information that this was bad. We have information that this was bad. I know it was stolen. I know I need X number of votes. I got to find X number of votes. It was stolen here. It was stolen there. But at no time did he say, I know it was stolen because this data here that I have from this person tells me that it was. Now, towards the end of it, the Georgia Secretary of State, who had been saying, President Trump, you're just wrong. We have no data about that. Where are you getting your information? Because it doesn't match what we've found in our investigations. And you got to remember, these guys are all Republicans. I don't think if Georgia had something, if they really believe they had something, I don't think they'd hesitate to tell somebody about it. But Trump was saying, okay, this is true, this is true, this is true, and I know this is true. I've got information that says this is true. And he doesn't say, I know because this person did this and told me. I know because this person did it and told me. We looked at this. He didn't say that ever. He just made a lot of claims. This got me into trouble with people on the right because my own personal opinion is that this election probably should have gone down differently. Given the enormous number of attack vectors to undermine the election, it's inconceivable to me that some of them weren't used. But I can't prove it. I can't prove it at all. But by not citing sources, well, Trump isn't proving it to these people on the phone. They have their own sources. They have their own investigation. It doesn't match what Trump is saying. So toward the end, they were like, okay, can we get some of these sources? Can you tell us where this comes from so that we can investigate it? And towards the end, they said, yes, we'll have a meeting with Trump's attorneys, blah, blah, blah. I don't know if they ever had it. I don't think whoever leaked that is ever going to be in a position to leak a phone call ever again. But it was not as damning as you might think. It was just Trump saying, here's what I need. Here's where I see the fraud. Please look into this, blah, blah, blah. And it was them saying, Mr. President, your information is wrong. We don't see that. We've done our own investigations. It's wrong. And it was President Trump being his usual bombastic self. Oh, I shouldn't have, endorsed the governor, blah, 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 because it's, I'm a narcissist and everybody has to be on my side, even if the evidence you've got doesn't jive with mine. So there's a lot of that going on. A lot of narcissism present. But in terms of actually doing something, I don't know if it rises to the level of illegal. Just listening to the whole thing go through, I got to go, well, all that happened really was he didn't have any sources. And the Georgians said, we'd like to see your sources. And I don't know if they were ever provided or not, but we'll never know that. That leaking of that particular recording was a one-off, and I don't know who did it, but I'm pretty sure the people in Georgia know who did it, and they're making sure that it never happens again. That really was just a private conversation, and it's the sort of thing that happens all the time. I don't think it's necessarily something that would be actionable. It was embarrassing for the president, no question. It gave the media propaganda and big tech propaganda lots of fodder to pull individual little snippets out to make it look really bad. But as a whole, that was not horrible. It was not a bad phone call. I don't think there's anything wrong with what went on there. Drop Truth asking, will I start doing reviews of The Expanse soon? Reviewing The Expanse is difficult because there's so much backstory involved. And the things that I can say about it, if I was going to review what I've seen so far, I would say I understand that the source material probably has the crew of the ship breaking up and going off and doing their own little quests at this point in the narrative. I am still a little disappointed that we don't see them all together consistently. I like that crew. I like how they interact. That said, it's still a really great show. Very rarely will you have a show that will have the cojones to repeatedly whack Earth with a bunch of large asteroids. So that got going for it, and it's always very, very scientifically accurate. That's a perfect place, by the way, for the kind of direction that I talked about not working in Discovery. It doesn't work in Discovery to, be interiors constantly rolling your camera around so that the crew is upside down or on a sideways and all that, because in Star Trek we have artificial gravity. When you do it in The Expanse, it's wonderful because they don't have artificial gravity. People are sticking to the walls of the ceiling of the floor. Well, there's no wall or ceiling and floor in space. Up is whatever your personal orientation happens to be. So for that, it makes perfect sense. You can do this thing where you're going down a corridor and you're following characters who appear to be upside down because they're walking with their feet oriented a certain way. And then you can rotate your camera around so that they're right side up and people passing them are upside down. That makes perfect sense. It's a great place to use that kind of direction. It's a bad place in Star Trek because of artificial gravity. Expanse is always very accurate scientifically. I don't think it's 100% accurate, but by God, it comes close. If they made no sound in outer space, it would come even closer. But I get that that's something that Hollywood kind of throws in there because it's kind of not exciting without any sound. So, in terms of The Expanse in general, it's a great show. You have to it's a different show. You can't go into it thinking that this is going to be, Star Wars or Star Trek. This is a different kind of show that is intentionally as scientifically accurate as possible. You will not see, depictions of weightlessness in other shows. You will not see minor things, like if somebody gets cut, if somebody gets hit. You need to get them to gravity very quickly because blood doesn't flow or congeal the same way in 0G that it does when you're under some kind of gravity. And for that, they have, rotating centrifuges and stuff like that they can take a person to. So it's really great from a scientific perspective, and I think it's engaging in terms of what I've seen in the first 5 seasons, 4.5. It's certainly very engaging. It certainly leaves you with wondering what's going to happen next. That's unusual for me as a secret master of fandom. It's very, very difficult to make me keep guessing on something. It does it such that I have intentionally not gone and read any of the source material, any of the books or the short stories, because at this stage I don't want to know what may or may be not being left out of the source material. I want to continue to be surprised. The fact that it's based on some pretty excellent source material, and there's a lot of it. The source material involves multiple books, many books, many short stories, all of which are a good chunk of which are being adapted. So I don't want to have the television viewing experience spoiled by the fact that I have already watched the. I don't want the television spoiled by the fact that I've already read all the books and stuff. Sorry, but it's one of those few times where I'm like, okay, this is so close to scientific accuracy that I don't want to, have anything spoiled about it. And I'm getting funky stuff. Try a different card. No, isn't that special? Okay. When is an homage actually plagiarism? I think, like for Star Trek Discovery, the preceding episode, which was essentially Die Hard in space. Boy, it comes so close. Like I say, I'm going to link after I'm done. I'll find the link to that video that the guy made where he does essentially a mashup, and he's just like, oh, these are... It's like he goes back and forth in such a way that what happens makes perfect sense in context of both Die Hard and that episode of Star Trek Discovery. In terms of it, what's an homage as opposed to plagiarism? I don't know. I guess an homage is when you do a little bit of something. Wonder Woman 1984 had Diana flying very, very similar to the way that Superman does in the 1980 Superman movie. That's an homage. You're not picking an entire plot. You're choosing little bits and pieces. It's homage, it's fan service, it's stuff like that. But it's not somebody intentionally taking something major and just saying, okay, I'll make this my own. the deal with the spore drive, and I've forgotten the name of the alien in Star Trek Discovery that was clearly taken from a video game. That's some level of plagiarism, right? But when you put it in context of some other stuff in the show, the plagiarism takes a slight backseat to what's going on in the show. Certainly Discovery does more plagiarism than anybody else, but nobody can prove it, or very likely, you're dealing with a company that's so big and has teams of attorney whose job it is to deal with intellectual property cases. I don't think that even if you had a really good case for plagiarism, I think if they went and they started making Ringworld, beat for beat, character name for character name, I don't think that you could necessarily get them, because unfortunately they can buy unlimited amount of attorneys, and you have a limited amount. And one of the truly evil things about the U.S. Justice system is that you can completely bankrupt someone if you want to. All you have to do, if you're a company with unlimited resources and on-staff attorneys whose job is just this all the time, you tell those attorneys, okay, we want to snow under the other person. We have unlimited resources. We have unlimited money. But every time we send something to their attorney, they have to pay $200 an hour so that they will respond. We'll just keep doing that and doing that and doing that and doing that until the person discovers they have no more money, or they're hemorrhaging money so bad that they drop the case. That happens. But in terms of what's an homage and what's actual plagiarism, you can look at Wonder Woman flying like Superman, and that's an homage. You look at something, I don't know, like Star Trek, the last Star Trek: The Next Generation cast movies, and Star Trek Nemesis. I think you could make some kind of case that they were ripping off Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan. There's a lot of story points and a lot of beats and action stuff that is very, very similar to Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan. I don't know exactly how that works, because ultimately here in the U.S., the studio owns that property, that intellectual property. So I don't know what you do. I've been hoping that, because Harlan Ellison hated when his words were touched, I keep hoping that maybe the Ellison estate will attempt to sue CBS for their use of The Guardian of Forever. Yeah. Drop of Truth says, I downloaded the Die Hard STD Season 3, Episode 12 comparison by Major Grant. It's great. Yeah. And Star Trek Nemesis was The Wrath of Khan. Yeah, it was so close. Mr. Plinkett did a review of Star Trek Nemesis, and he said, well, I'm not saying that they ripped off that. I'm not really saying that they ripped off that plot, but what I am saying is they ripped off that plot, which is, good. Yeah, as you say, the Plinkett review of Nemesis really nails it. If you haven't watched the Nemesis review, the Plinkett reviews, and you like science fiction at all, go watch them. They're hysterical. They're awesome. They're the funniest things that Red Letter Media ever puts out, is their Plinkett reviews. Okay, so I'm kind of done with that part. Talked about the Trump Georgia phone call. So we might as well get into the 2021 New Year's Day special for Doctor Who, called Revolution of the Daleks. This episode sucked. It sucked. Reusing clips. Yeah, reusing shots. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Remaking shots for that, But this Doctor Who 2021 New Year's Day special, Revolution of the Daleks. It sucked. It brought back some characters that should never have been brought back, one of whom is clearly an analog of Donald Trump, but done in such a way that it doesn't actually resemble Donald Trump in any way. It's just dumb, and the script tends to be all over there. We last saw the Doctor at the end of last season. She was put in prison somewhere. Now we see her in prison and all that, and it was kind of like you expected. There was a couple of cute moments while she's in prison. The fact that this prison has a weeping angel chained up is kind of fun. And then Captain Jack Harkness shows up for no reason. I think it was a Hail Mary. I think that people are starting to watch this show and the ratings are tanking, and it's all stupid woke garbage and nobody wants to watch. And so I think all that happened there was they said, Captain Jack was really popular. Let's get Captain Jack back. So they brought him back, and there's a couple of issues. It's the same thing I mentioned last week about Wonder Woman. You're dealing with an immortal demigoddess in Wonder Woman. You're dealing with a mortal demigod who does not age. Captain Jack Harkness doesn't exactly not age, but he's gone hundreds of years without showing much more than a gray hair. Unfortunately, it has now been 10 or more years since John Barrowman, who plays Captain Jack, has been on the show. And his character is not quite ageless, but very much close to it. Now, ultimately, he is going to alter. They kind of pretty much implied that he's going to become an alien that they saw early on in the series called the Face of Bo. But in order for him to have visibly aged as much as he did, there should have been a passage of time indicated that would have been in the centuries, right? Maybe for him it would have been 500 years since he last saw the doctor so that he looked as old as he does now. But they didn't do that. He was apparently there for some period of time waiting around for her to help her get her out of prison. But it turned into, unfortunately, a Deus Ex Machina. In this case, a Captain Jack Ex Machina. You know, he's out of nowhere. The guy's just there, and he saves her life and gets her out of the prison. So that was kind of silly. And his use throughout the rest of the episode, in dramatic purposes, was to be telling the companions who are thinking about leaving how great it is to be with the doctor, and yet he doesn't stay with her, which would have made perfect sense. He doesn't even ask. It would have made perfect sense for him to say, "Doctor, I've waited for a long time to be able to be back in the TARDIS. It's really where I'd like to be. Can I be there?" Because all of the dialogue and stuff that he's got leading up to that indicate that he wants to be there. But then he just doesn't. And we have a name drop of another character from another series. And this has caused some fans to go, "Yay, yay, we're going to get more Torchwood." I'm like, no, you ain't getting more Torchwood. This is just fan service. There's no more Torchwood. That's not happening. So his use in here was a little silly and kind of pointless, ultimately. The plot of the thing bothered me because the current showrunner, who is a hack fraud, he's a woke hack fraud, Chris Chibnall. Chibnall is a completely woke hack fraud who couldn't write anything to save his life and is terrible at Doctor Who. He came up with this crap where they've got, how to put this? He had to, last season, explicitly state that UNIT, the Unified Intelligence Task Force, which is basically the organization on Earth that deals with, things when they come to threaten Earth. He had to completely disband them. And it didn't make any sense then. It certainly doesn't make any sense now because you had a freaking invasion of Daleks, right? That's the sort of thing that would be under UNIT's supervision. If it had happened to any other doctor, the doctor would have shown up on Earth and UNIT would be all over this thing and the doctor would be there to save the day. But because she didn't, we had to have this giant invasion thing that really should never have happened. So that was kind of dumb right from the beginning. You had characters coming back that shouldn't have come back. And then finally at the end, they got rid of 2 companions. That's a good thing. I've said over and over the problem with this show is twofold. First, you have a hack who writes it. But secondly, you have too many characters. Doctor Who works best when you have maybe 1, possibly 2 companions. 1 is best because you only have, 10 episodes. And so you can't do the right amount of character development for 4 characters. It's just not possible. You don't have enough time. So by reducing it down to 1, then it works. I wouldn't have reduced it to that 1. I'd have preferred to see Graham staying around. But maybe we'll see some characterization going forwards of Yaz, who's the one that stayed around. I don't know. Kind of hard for me to imagine it. She's it's Chris Chibnall. The man can't write. He can't write. He writes stupid, intelligence assaulting, woke garbage. It's bad. Anything that he writes has been bad, and the show has suffered for it, and so has its ratings clearly suffered for it. So that all said, we have to ask ourselves, at the end of the review, is it any good? Well, my rating scale for Doctor Who is actually very high. It's the exact opposite of Star Trek, because Star Trek continues to be total disappointment, whereas Doctor Who, it's very high, and that's because Doctor Who has consistently surprised me throughout the years. And it's very difficult to surprise a secret master of fandom, because we have watched, read, and listened to over 100 years worth of science fiction. And after a while, we discover that nothing is new, nothing is original, and I usually figure it out really early, sometimes in the middle of the freaking trailer, you figure it out. And you go back 100 years and you discover that we're still writing some of the same stories, the same themes as we did, as science fiction writers 100 years ago did. And it's like, God, nothing's new. Doctor Who has, over the years, consistently been able to surprise me. Not with Chris Chibnall. So my scale on this is much, much higher. It is 1 is passable. I don't expect to ever be, dying from watching something. It's passable. And 5 is a very high mark. It is as good as The Day of the Doctor. If you haven't seen it, The Day of the Doctor is by far the best Doctor Who episode ever made. It was the 50th anniversary 2-hour special episode. It is an awesome, awesome thing of beauty, particularly if you have been keeping up on the Doctor Who stories from 2005 until that episode. It was the best episode ever in Doctor Who. So my 5 is the gold standard, the best ever. 1 is passable, 5 is the best ever. Well, unfortunately, with Chris Chibnall running the show, unfortunately, I have had to have bad reviews, such that for this one, Revolution of the Daleks, I actually have to give it a 0.3. It's not like Star Trek, where you can die from watching it. It is just bad. It's not passable. Almost nothing that Chibnall makes is passable. This doesn't rise to passable. So where if I was doing it with Star Trek scale, I might say, okay, where 1 is existentially threateningly bad and 5 is passable. On that scale, I'd probably give it a 3 or so. On this scale, where 1 is passable and 5 is astonishing, it gets about a 0.3. It's barely passable. It's insulting to my intelligence. It had things in it that didn't make sense. It had things in it that, were woke and stupid and caused viewers to want to change away, which is what they did. This one has the lowest ratings of any special. It is continuing the show's slide into complete darkness. If they don't do something soon, they are going to have no more show left. They're going to wind up canceling it because the ratings are starting to get just that bad. Speaking of which, it is now being told, I'm not sure if the BBC has yet confirmed it, but a lot of news outlets are saying it, that Jodie Whittaker, who plays the current Doctor, will be leaving at the end of this season. So Jodie Whittaker, I'm sorry, how did that get in there? Jodie Whittaker is a fine actress. She is a decent enough actress. Her leaving, I do not know what the actual reason for her leaving is. They always say the same things, which is, I did like all the other Doctors, and I'm only going to give it 3 years and then move on. But if you're having fun at the gig, if you're getting some good recognition for it, you don't necessarily have to do that. David Tennant was there for longer. Tom Baker was there forever. If you're doing a good job and you're popular and you're enjoying what you're doing, you can stay for a long time. There's no reason that she has to leave, has to. But fans now are going, isn't that wonderful? Finally, we're going to be rid of this and everything's going to be great. No, guys, it's not. The problem is not Jodie Whittaker as the doctor. The problem is Chris Chibnall, the guy who is the showrunner, the guy who can't write his way out of a wet paper bag. Much like Alex Kurtzman, he is a talentless hack who took over a good series, remade it as an SJW cringe fest that nobody wants to watch. He's the problem. Jodie Whittaker could stay on. She is a good actress. She has difficulty with this material. It's Chris Chibnall you need to get rid of. She can't do anything with the crap that she's being handed. I always like to point out, Star Trek Next Generation, right? The first 2 seasons of that were real shaky. Occasionally you'd get a real gem, but a lot of the time it was mediocre to bad scripts. But Sir Patrick Stewart is such a good actor that even if he's dealing with clunky dialogue for an episode that doesn't make a lot of sense, he is so good that he can still sell it. I watched him do it for 2 years. I wrote reviews back then about every single episode. Watched him do it for 2 years. The man can take almost anything and somehow sell it and make it work. Well, Jodie Whittaker is a fine actress, but she is not Sir Patrick's level. He has a knighthood for a reason. And so when she gets crap, there's really only so much she can do with it. I mean, I don't know how I would do it. If I was given this crap material every week to deal with, how do I sell something that's stupid, maybe doesn't make sense, is total SJW cringiness? How do I sell that? That's the position she's in. She's in a position of having crap material thrown at her every single week, without exception. Under Chris Chibnall's stewardship, Doctor Who has been crap every single episode, with no exceptions. Sometimes you'll get a reasonably good one, like with the introduction of the current master. Those are pretty good, but that's because he's flipping off the walls, and his performance is awesome. But it's not because of the material. The material is always crap. And there is only so much that even a good actress can do with crap. So Jodie Whittaker leaving isn't a good thing. I would love to see her in a series that wasn't written by a hack. I mean, she's done well in other, genres and series. I would love to see her play the Doctor in something that was good. It'd be awesome to see her in, say, before Stephen Moffat jumped the shark with The Day of the Doctor. If he wrote scripts for her, I think that would be awesome. It would be great. But Chris Chibnall can't write to save his life, and so she ends up looking bad. So fans of Doctor Who, please be aware. It's not Jodie Whittaker that's the problem. It doesn't matter who plays the Doctor. You could get Matt Smith back. You could get David Tennant back. It wouldn't matter, because the problem is that the showrunner doesn't know what they're doing. They think that wokeness is the same thing as good material, and it's not. It's just not. It's not her fault, guys. It is not Jodie Whittaker's fault. It is the fault of showrunner Chris Chibnall. Those are the things that I really have planned to talk about today. Looks like it's about 11:08. Probably lost some of my viewers right off the bat. I'm sure it's currently showing 2 concurrent. I probably lost a bunch of my viewers right off the bat with the notion that President Trump unknowingly has incited insurrection. I believe, as much as I do not want Biden to be president, I would say, probably again, that even if he didn't know he was inciting insurrection, that alone has now proven him unfit for public office. You have to be careful when you're president. You can't tweet for 2 years about how horrible everyone but you is and not have your followers start to believe it. And you can't, as president, just say things, because what you say can cause governments to topple, can cause stock markets to crash. Just your words can do that. And in this case, his words were seen by 100,000 people in Washington as a rubber stamp to go down to the Capitol, breach the doors, breach the House of Representatives, and cause a joint session of Congress to hastily go into recess and flee for their lives. And that has never happened in American history. Americans have never done that before. And again, understanding that the right is pissed off, that still doesn't make what happened right. It doesn't make what happened right at all. Just pushes us, inches us ever closer to civil war, which may now be something that is unavoidable. And I have to tell you, last night too, yesterday when I was talking about it, you have to understand that civil war isn't going to turn out the way the people who want to have one think it's going to turn out. Civil wars never turn out the way that anyone wants. They are historically unpredictable. So if you're somebody who wants a civil war and you're saying to yourself, well, it'll be quick, it'll be easy, the left doesn't have any real weapons, we'll just, take them over and kill them. I have to tell you guys, even letting aside all the blood and guts and horror and veins in your teeth and eating dead, burnt bodies that you'll have to engage in, that the left is not powerless. I have been listening to them for 123 days 223 days as of today, when they will consistently commit arson, robbery, armed robbery, assault with a deadly weapon, and the murder of innocents. You don't hear it very much because neither of our propaganda complexes want to report it, but it happens every night somewhere in the U.S. It's still going on. The best thing you can say about it right now is, with it being cold in a good chunk of the northern hemisphere, it has slowed them down. But they're still out there. They're still doing this stuff. So if you think you're going to have an easy fight on your hand, think again. And also, I've heard these same idiots talking about how, the military will break ranks and do what we want. You guys are idiots. The military will follow lawful orders given to them by their superiors, because if they don't, it's either immediate death or a court-martial and life in Fort Leavenworth. The reason that an officer carries a sidearm is not to fight the enemy. It's useless for fighting the enemy. A sidearm, a pistol, is carried by an officer because it's intended to be used in the event that their men don't follow orders. Somebody says no, it is perfectly fine. You will not get into any trouble. If you're in the middle of a firefight and someone says no, if you draw your firearm and shoot them dead, and then say, anybody else, there will be no problem with that. That's the whole reason that an officer has a sidearm, to kill the people under him who will not follow his orders. So if you're thinking that, we're going to storm the Capitol and the military will come out and instead of, killing people, they'll just be on our side, you're an imbecile. They will, almost all of them, go for the option that does not wind up with them dead or in Fort Leavenworth. I look at my close relative who does all the Department of Defense work, all the classified stuff inside of Cheyenne Mountain. I'm sure that I don't know where he stands on some issues. We really don't talk about this stuff because it ultimately touches on what his work is, and I don't ever bring that up. I know how it is to have NDAs, and I've had them with the government. You don't bring that stuff up. There's just no point. He'll at best say, well, I can't talk about that. But at worst, you might be, exposing him to some level of trouble that you don't want to get him into. But he might say somebody like that had, sympathies towards the people on the right. And what they're working on would be something that would hurt them if there was a civil war. He's going to go with the option that isn't him winding up in prison, which is what happens if he fails to work on the things he's supposed to work on. That's the way this all goes down, it's either death or prison. Death or prison. If you don't follow orders, it's death or prison. Is the average soldier going to suddenly break ranks? They had the National Guard out there yesterday. Are the National Guardsmen just going to break ranks? No, they're going to follow the officers, their superiors' orders. That's what they're trained to do. Follow their orders. So if you think that suddenly they're going to, side with you got another think coming. You really have another thing coming. Well, I'm not seeing a lot of questions. It's been about 2 hours and 15 minutes, so I will probably let it go there for tonight. That is really all I have to say about that. I'm so sure I lost some viewers on the right, unfortunately, but I speak what I think is the truth, whether you like it or not. The fact that you think that I was on your side up to this point was solely because our interests intersected. Be assured that with the Democrats now running the show, I will have many, 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 many criticisms about them that you will agree with. But by the same token, beyond a certain point, I won't care about them. I don't have any emotional investment in them or any Republican at all. They're just some people who are hired to do a job. They're about to violate the Constitution in massive ways, restricting the Second Amendment, restricting the First, restricting the Fourth. It's going to be terrible. They're probably going to end up causing famine that will ultimately kill 15% or so of the population. But to be honest, that happens in the event of a civil war. It's something you guys who are in favor of a civil war, I told about it yesterday, but it bears repeating. What you don't understand is, in the event of a civil war, it does not suddenly reset to liberty. I've seen that repeatedly where people on the right say, well, it'll reset to liberty. No, it won't. Here's what happens in a civil war. Backstory. The United States federal government has indebted itself more than any nation ever in history. And in fact, if you took all of the debt ever incurred by every nation from the beginning of time, this is not an exaggeration, from the beginning of recorded history to present, and added it all up, you will discover that we are indebted multiple orders of magnitude more than that. The only reason that the U.S. dollar survives at all is because it is the world's reserve currency, and it is the currency in which oil is traded. Essentially, you can say that the U.S. dollar is backed by oil. In the event, and the reason that this goes on, the reason this can happen is because other countries around the world assume that the United States is stable. We'll never repay our debt. That's impossible. It's beyond the scope of anybody's capability to do it. But we are at least stable. Well, unfortunately, in a civil war, you're demonstrating to everyone that you are no longer stable. When that happens, people are going to start outside of the country, will start, even inside the country, will start dumping anything that looks like a dollar. They're going to stop making the world reserve currency be a dollar because they don't know what it'll be worth tomorrow. They're going to stop it being the petrodollar. That will disappear. That alone will then cause a currency collapse. And any nation in history that has ever indebted itself even to a fraction of what we have has experienced currency collapse followed by governmental collapse. Their currency became worthless and their government dropped. It fell. Well, some were in there along with that because, you see, you have to have a functioning currency in order to provide food, in order to get food from where it is out in a western South Dakota ranch to on your table is a long chain, and it's breakable at any given point. But what would happen is, without a functioning dollar, with a dollar that's worth nothing, which is what happens when you overextend yourselves and you have all this debt and it's impossible to pay back, you experience currency collapse. When that happens, it will either massively disrupt or collapse completely the food supply chain. So if you're in a city, you ain't going to get any more steaks in your grocery store. Ain't happening. Because out here, we can't get the food from there to you. We can't get the food into the various places on the chain. It can't get a cow into the various places on the chain where it ultimately gets slaughtered. You can't get it out of the slaughterhouse and into, wholesalers. You can't get it from wholesalers into, it's a lengthy chain. And without a functioning dollar, you're done. You're just done. No more food. So here's what happens in the event of a real civil war. Almost all of America's 320 million plus people die of starvation. Almost all of them. Every single major city, every single minor city, I would suggest that any city that is more than a few thousand and that isn't immediately adjacent to agricultural land, all of those people will starve. Those of you who are looking for civil war, guess what? You get to starve. The U.S. military will last a little bit longer, but eventually they're going to run out of MREs, and their people will starve. Or you'll see mass desertion, which is more likely. The outcome of a civil war is not additional liberty. The outcome of a civil war is famine, death, and pestilence on a truly biblical scale. So, just want you guys to know that's what lies in store for you if you continue trying to have a civil war. No matter how right you feel, at the end of the day, you, your family, your children, you're all going to starve because you're all dependent on this, and myself included. I am dependent on a lengthy food supply chain that would completely collapse in the event of the dollar collapse. And that's what would happen if you had a civil war. The dollar would collapse, and you get to starve. So, I guess, given the time and the fact that I'm not seeing anybody, and the fact that my back is starting to go, I would say that is all that I have to say about that. I would love to keep this conversation going, so please leave your comments, questions, and nasty remarks. I'll do my best to respond to you. So thanks for watching. That's all the time that we have today for this episode of Tales from SYL Ranch, where everyone is entitled to my opinion. And I'm Bill Stone.
Ultimate power in this world has always been one simple thing: the control and manipulation of minds.